President John F. Kennedy sat at his desk in the Oval Office on May 18, 1963, to compose a barely diplomatic letter to Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion of Israel regarding Israel's nuclear facility at Dimona in the Negev desert. This was the strongest language Kennedy used with Israel in his reign as President of the United States. It was almost an ultimatum. Hello and welcome again to the Edge of Politics podcast. Geopolitical Queen here with today's episode on how Israel lied its way out to build nuclear weapons, blindsiding its ally, the United States. This is the story of what JFK said to Israel about nuclear weapons, how he pressurized Israel to stop its nuclear program, and how the conflict between Kennedy and Ben-Gurion became one of the most serious crises in the U.S.-Israel relations. So what happened again? In 1958, Israel began constructing a nuclear reactor in the Negev desert near the town of Dimona. The facility was built with French assistance. France provided the reactor design, the equipment, and technical expertise. President Kennedy wanted the United States inspectors to have full access to the Dimona nuclear facility. Israel had been refusing and Kennedy had had enough. Less than 1 month after this letter was sent, David Ben-Gurion resigned as Prime Minister of Israel, and 6 months later, John F. Kennedy was assassinated. Israel told the world the facility was a textile plant. Later, Israel said it was a research reactor for peaceful purposes. Both statements were lies. The facility at Dimona was designed to produce plutonium for nuclear weapons. U.S. intelligence agency discovered the construction in 1960. U-2 spy plane flights over Israel photographed the site. CIA analysts studied the photos. They concluded that Israel was building a nuclear reactor far larger than needed for research. They also concluded that Israel intended to develop nuclear weapons. In December 1960, outgoing President Dwight Eisenhower confronted Israeli officials about Dimona. Ben-Gurion, who was Prime Minister at the time, admitted that the facility existed, but insisted that it was purely for peaceful research. Eisenhower, although skeptical, left the problem for the incoming president. John F. Kennedy became president on January 20, 1961. He inherited the Dimona problem, and he decided it was unacceptable for Israel to develop nuclear weapons. Kennedy's reasons were both strategic and moral. Strategically, Kennedy believed that if Israel developed nuclear weapons, Arab states would also seek their own nuclear weapons. This would trigger a nuclear arms race in the Middle East. Kennedy was therefore trying to prevent nuclear proliferation globally. He had negotiated the limited test ban treaty with the Soviet Union. He was pushing for broader non-proliferation agreements. Israel developing nuclear weapons would undermine the efforts. Morally, Kennedy believed nuclear weapons were dangerous and their spread needed to be stopped. He had seen how close the world came to a nuclear war during the Cuban Missile Crisis in October 1962. He was therefore determined to prevent more countries from acquiring these weapons. In May 1961, Kennedy met with Ben-Gurion in New York. Kennedy raised the Dimona issue. He demanded for assurances that Israel was not developing nuclear weapons. Ben-Gurion gave those assurances. He claimed that Dimona was for peaceful purposes only. Kennedy didn't believe him, though. The U.S. intelligence continued to monitor Dimona. The facility was growing. Construction continued. The reactor was becoming operational. Kennedy decided he needed verification. In the summer of 1961, he requested for U.S. inspectors to be sent to Dimona for an inspection. Ben-Gurion initially refused. However, after much pressure from the U.S., he agreed to allow limited inspections. The first inspection occurred in May 1961. 2 U.S. scientists visited Dimona. They were given a tour of the facility. They saw the reactor. They spoke with Israeli scientists. They filed a report concluding that the reactor appeared to be for research purposes, but the inspection was inadequate. The U.S. inspectors were shown only certain parts of the facility. They were not allowed to take samples. Neither were they allowed to all the areas. They only had unrestricted access. Israeli officials controlled what they saw. U.S. intelligence agencies were not satisfied. They believed Israel was hiding the true purpose of Dimona. They believed they were underground facilities which the inspectors couldn't see. Kennedy pressed for more inspections. In 1962, another team of U.S. scientists visited Dimona. Again, they were given very limited access. Again, their report was inconclusive. Behind the scenes, something significant was happening. And what could that have been? Israel had deceived the inspectors all along. Years later, after the facts became public, it was revealed that Israel had built a fake control room in Dimona. When the U.S. inspectors visited, they were shown this fake control room. The real control room and the real work of the facility were hidden from them. Kennedy suspected deception, but he didn't have enough proof. He continued to pressurize Ben-Gurion. The correspondence between Kennedy and Ben-Gurion intensified in 1962 and 1963. Kennedy sent multiple letters. The letters were polite at first, but became increasingly firm. In a letter dated July 5, 1963, Kennedy wrote to Ben-Gurion.
I am sure you will agree that there is no more urgent business for the whole world than the control of nuclear weapons. We have been in touch with the Soviet Union and other countries regarding this issue. Kennedy
was making clear that Israel's nuclear program was part of a larger global problem. He was treating Israel the same way that he was treating other countries that might develop nuclear weapons. Kennedy continued in the same letter, "I am convinced that the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons is vital to the security of Israel." This was a key argument. Kennedy was likely telling Ben-Gurion that nuclear weapons would actually make Israel less safe and not more safe. If Israel developed nuclear weapons, Arab states would also pursue their own. Israel would therefore face nuclear-armed enemies. Better, Kennedy agreed to prevent nuclear weapons from entering the region at all. Ben-Gurion's responses to Kennedy's letters were evasive. He insisted Dimona was peaceful. He provided limited information. He allowed limited inspections, but he did not stop the nuclear program. Kennedy became frustrated. In May 1963, he sent the letter dated May 18, 1963, which is now declassified. And Kennedy wrote,
Dear Mr. Prime Minister, I welcome your letter of May 12 and am giving it careful study. Meanwhile, I have received from Ambassador Barber a report of his conversation with you on May 14th regarding the arrangements for visiting the Dimona reactor. I should like to add some personal comments on that subject. I am sure you will agree that there is no more urgent business for the whole world than the control of nuclear weapons. We have been in touch with the Soviet Union and with other countries regarding this issue, and I can tell you that we have been making some progress. As I wrote to you on previous occasions, this government's commitment to and support of Israel could be seriously jeopardized if it should be thought that we were unable to obtain reliable information on a subject as vital to peace as the question of Israel's effort in the nuclear field. Therefore, I asked our scientists to visit Dimona as often as seemed necessary for us to obtain reliable information. When we spoke together in May 1961, you said that we could make whatever use of the visit of two scientists to Dimona that we considered appropriate. I believe that this question of visits to the Dimona reactor is of sufficient importance to both our countries that I should like to have a better understanding between us on this subject.
Kennedy then outlined what he expected: regular visits, unrestricted access, and truthful information. This latter was the strongest pressure Kennedy had yet applied. The phrase "seriously jeopardized" was barely diplomatic. Kennedy was essentially threatening to reconsider U.S. support for Israel if Ben-Gurion did not comply. Ben-Gurion received this letter, but he did not respond immediately. Rather, on June 16, 1963, less than 1 month after receiving Kennedy's letter, Ben-Gurion resigned as Prime Minister of Israel. Ben-Gurion's resignation shocked Israel and the world. He was 76 years old at the time. He had led Israel since its founding in 1948, with brief interruptions. He was the father of the nation. His sudden resignation seemed to come out of nowhere. Ben-Gurion cited personal reasons for his resignation. He said that he was tired and needed rest. He also claimed that internal political conflicts in his party had exhausted him, but the timing was striking. Kennedy's harshest letter arrived in May. Ben-Gurion resigned in June. Some historians have suggested a connection. They argue that Ben-Gurion resigned rather than comply with Kennedy's demands to stop the nuclear program. Other historians, however, are more cautious. They note that Ben-Gurion had been considering resignation for some time and that there were genuine political conflicts within his party. They argue that the timing may have been coincidental. What is clear, though, is that Ben-Gurion did not respond to Kennedy's May 18th letter before resigning. He left the problem for his successor, Levi Eshkol, who became Prime Minister of Israel on June 26, 1963, to solve. Eshkol inherited the crisis with Kennedy over Dimona. He took a different approach than Ben-Gurion. Eshkol sent a letter to Kennedy in July 1963. His letter was more conciliatory than Ben-Gurion's had been. Eshkol agreed to annual visits by U.S. scientists to Dimona. He provided more information about the facility's operations and tried to ease Kennedy's concerns. Kennedy accepted Eshkol's commitments but remained watchful. Another inspection was scheduled for 1964. However, on November 22, 1963, Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas. Lyndon Johnson became president, and the pressure on Israel over Dimona effectively ended. Johnson took a different approach to Israel than Kennedy did. Johnson was more supportive of Israel. He was less concerned about Dimona. The inspections continued for a few more years, but became increasingly perfunctory. U.S. inspectors were still not gaining full access, and the Johnson administration was not pushing as hard as Kennedy had done. By 1967, Israel had developed nuclear weapons. The exact date Israel achieved nuclear capability is disputed. Some historians say it was in 1966, others also say 1967, but it is generally agreed that as of the time of the Six-Day War in June 1967, Israel had operational nuclear weapons. Israel has never officially confirmed or denied that it possesses nuclear weapons. The Israeli policy is called nuclear ambiguity or nuclear opacity. Although neither confirming or denying having nuclear weapons, the evidence is overwhelming that Israel has had nuclear weapons since the late 60s. Today, Israel is estimated to possess about 80 and 400 nuclear warheads. The exact number is classified, but Israel is recognized as a nuclear-armed state, though not officially. Israeli leaders believed that nuclear weapons provided the ultimate guarantee against destruction. What is not in dispute is that Kennedy tried to stop it. He sent multiple letters, he demanded inspections, he pressured Ben-Gurion, he used the strongest diplomatic language short of threatening to end the US-Israeli entirely. The declassified letters between Kennedy and Ben-Gurion are remarkable documents. They show a president willing to confront an ally over a matter of principle, and an Israeli leader deceiving his ally with lies. They show a conflict that went to the heart of both nations' security concerns. The letters are now available in the Kennedy Presidential Library and in the Israeli State Archives. Historians have provided a window into a moment when US-Israeli relations were strained in ways that most people didn't even realize. Kennedy's May 18, 1963 letter, the one that warned that US support could be seriously jeopardized, is particularly striking when read today. It is hard to imagine any recent US president using such language against Israel. The US-Israeli relationship has changed dramatically since 1963. Israel is now one of US' closest allies. The idea of a US president threatening to reconsider support for Israel over a policy disagreement seems almost unthinkable today. But in 1963, the relationship was different. The US had presidents who really cared about global security, as compared to the compromised US presidents we have today. Those who support Kennedy's position agree that he was trying to prevent nuclear proliferation. They agree that he was trying to stop an arms race in the Middle East, and that his concerns were justified. Those who support Israel's position also argue that Israel needed nuclear weapons for its survival, and that Arab states were existential threats. They claim Israel had the right to defend itself by any means necessary. What is certain, however, is that Kennedy made the attempt. He confronted Israel, he demanded transparency, he threatened consequences, but assassination was his reward. Israel developed the nuclear weapons anyway, and the Middle East has never experienced peace from Israel since then. Kennedy's non-proliferation goals, at least regarding Israel, were unfortunately not achieved. Today, Israel's nuclear weapons are a fact. They are part of the strategic landscape of the Middle East. They shape how Israel is viewed by its neighbors and by the world. And they all began at Dimona, at the facility that Kennedy tried so hard to inspect, to understand, and to stop it, but he had to be eliminated. So what did JFK say to Israel about nuclear weapons? He said that the US support could be seriously jeopardized if Israel did not allow full inspections. He also said that preventing nuclear proliferation was urgent business for the whole world. He went on further to say that Israel's nuclear program could undermine global efforts to control nuclear weapons. All these were stated in letters, in meetings, in diplomatic cables. He said them clearly and firmly, repeatedly and insistently. Israel, on the other hand, pretended to listen, told lies to the US, made fake promises, allowed limited inspection, and did not stop to build their nuclear weapons. And when Kennedy was assassinated, the pressure ended. The nuclear program continued, and Israel became a nuclear power through lies and has never allowed its neighbors to have their peace in the Middle East. Disclaimer: before our usual Israelis start shouting anti-Semitism, this video presents historical events based on declassified letters between President JFK and Ben-Gurion the liar. JFK Presidential Library, Israeli State Archives, Air Cohen's Israel and the Bomb, State Department cables, CIA reports, and verified historical documentation. The content is for educational purposes. So what do you think? Did President Kennedy do his best to make the world a better place by trying to stop Israel from building nuclear weapons, or he was only stringed on by a deceitful, lying Ben-Gurion? Well, kindly leave your thoughts in the comment section below, and thanks for tuning in. I will be back with the next broadcast. Good day.